Have you ever considered all the stories we carry behind polite introductions? For so many, meeting someone new is simple. It's a simple exchange, small talk. Not so much for me. It's a complex dance of interactions. When people notice my accent and recognize I am not originally from here, the usual where you from and oh, have you got any family there questions follow. Which is nothing wrong with that. It's perfectly normal and friendly. But the problem is that it can be quite triggering for me to talk about my life back in Turkey and my family due to past childhood trauma and loss. My autistic brain tells me to just say it as it is, but societal norms kind of prizes politeness over the raw truth of our lives. So I approach every new introduction like a game of chess, planning every move, thinking what they're going to say and what I'm going to say. But what if we didn't do that? What if we just say it as it is and we could be real ourselves in who we are, turning upside down the social norms? The reason I'm saying this, I have actually experienced this more recently in most unexpected of places. I was at a conference dinner, very posh dinner on a round table. I was the only woman on the table with a lot of men suited and booted. And for some reason, unbeknown to me, I turned to the guy left to me and just say something real about myself. Quite painful at the time, actually. And to my surprise, he said something real back. And before we know, everybody else in the table disappeared and we just got into this most authentic, healing and very much needed conversations. We still keep in touch, haven't met yet. I've never met this gentleman in my life before. It was a complete stranger and it was a professional environment. So it got me thinking, really. So let me take you to my story back to 1970s Istanbul, Turkey, to give you a little bit of context. I'm going to speak quite frankly and share without the usual embellishments. So there's a bit of a downer at the beginning, but don't worry, it will get better. It will get much better. So I was born into a family of 4 siblings as the youngest. Unwanted, unexpected child. They thought I was going to be a boy, but I turned out to be a girl. And it was a strange time in Turkey. There was economic and political turmoil. Shortly after, there was going to be a coup d'etat, a military ruling, which will lead to suspension of democracy. And soon after, this chaos would be mirrored in my own family. So when I was 7, my father went to prison. I still remember how cold and daunting the building was and the feeling of not wanting to go back there. Following this, I lost my loving grandparents, which were my main carers, and then our home, and soon after, my mother and siblings were all separated. Around this time, I also got very ill. So I was around 7 and 8, and I was diagnosed with an autoimmune condition called juvenile idiopathic arthritis. It's a rare condition, happens to young kids and results in joint inflammation and pain. And so I didn't have access to very good medical care. We didn't have the NHS equivalent in Turkey. So I've lost a lot of school and couldn't leave bed most of the time. When I was 14, I lived in many addresses, but didn't really have anywhere that I could call home. I did experience a lot of abuse and neglect during this time. And I used to find solace in 2 things: animals, which we had plenty on the streets in Turkey, dogs and cats, and I used to sort of mother all of them, and because they were my best friends. I didn't have many, if any, friends. And books, because I didn't have any role models as such. But when I lost myself in a book, I could then, imagine a better future, imagine a life that is perhaps worth living, something outside of what I have known. At the age of 21, things got better. I was successful in securing a job which would lead me to the UK, which would be a massive turn in my life story. I remember arriving at the airport, just like yesterday, which was 24 years ago, with a suitcase under one arm full of books, because I didn't have many belongings. I wanted my books. And amongst these books was my favorite, Teachings of Rumi. Some of you may not be familiar with Rumi. So Rumi is a 13th century mystic and poet. His final resting place was Konya, Turkey. And his teachings explore truth, love, and our connection to the divine. So there's a line, very powerful line in one of his poems that always resonated with me. Because I didn't have many people to ask for direction or guidance. I always gone back to Rumi because he always had answers somehow in those books, the exact answer I needed. But this one line bewildered me because I didn't quite get what he meant at the time. It was, the wound is the place where the light enters you. I figured, with my autistic brain, the wound metaphorically symbolized the emotional pain, scars, psychological scars we all have. And Rumi says, this is the very place of vulnerability where the light enters, and light symbolizing wisdom, insight, and transformative power. So I arrived in the UK as a young woman, unbeknown to me at the time that I was autistic. It was going to be years to come, the reveal. I was very wary of people. Just imagine then the magnitude of change, because the reason I'm making a point of being autistic is autism is often characterized with grappling with changes in routine environments and social cues. And I'm in a new country, the language, the cultural norms, everything is different. And I didn't know anybody other than the few people I made contact with. So it was really easy for me to then draw upon in that knowledge, thinking, okay, there's something that I can learn here. When I was 25, I embraced motherhood with 2 children and had the family that I always carried with me. And that gave me sort of courage to go back to education, because I wanted to do something that was greater than myself and my family, and just give back to those who needed the things that I've learned, because I didn't have anybody helping me. So I had this calling to become an occupational therapist, because I wanted to help people to do the things that they can't due to limitations imposed onto them. But this calling is not unique to me by any means. It's widely recognized in the field of health professionals and therapists that they are drawn to their profession due to their inherent personal experiences and early childhood trauma. Unfortunately, though, most health professionals fear losing their professional reputation if they were to acknowledge these personal struggles within themselves. That's due to stigma, which is very much still alive in the healthcare and medical field. And this is despite the guidance that actually diverse populations are served better by a diverse workforce who experience similar struggles themselves and can recognize in others and help them better. This phenomena of wanting to help others because you've gone through difficulties is known as wounded healer. So it's an archetypal coin termed by Carl Jung, a father of analytical psychology. But actually it goes back to antiquity, to shamanism, where woundedness was a sustained tradition. And they believe that those who carry wounds could actually become better healers. So in a nutshell, Carl Jung believed that people who've gone through difficult life circumstances or trauma develop the resilience to, and then the need to actually want to help to lessen the suffering of others. So of course, then the wounded killer then again reminded me Rumi's words as to the wound is the place where the light enters you. So when I was diagnosed with autism, it was quite late in my life. I have achieved a lot of professional achievements and family, but there was always a part of me that was locked in self-esteem and second-guessed myself. So I was always told to be too direct or too blunt with the truth. People will joke about, oh, that's because she's Turkish, like excusing me for my being truthful. And I come to understand, actually, this was yet another opening for me. Because of autism, actually, I was the way I was. I would be not was because I was Turkish or because I was trying to be mean to people by telling them the truth. Sometimes, no matter how hard I tried, the social nuances was lost on me. So I said things as it is. But that was to the detriment of my relationships with friends and family, because not everybody would like to know the truth, and I don't blame them. I get just as hurt when I hear the truth sometimes. So I looked at autism then, again, as a wound, and thinking about how the light enters the wound and heals it is because if you think of the wound as a more literally, a wound goes through a process of healing as well. And it goes through a process of inflammation and remodeling. And in order to do that, you have to leave the open wound. You have to open it to the light, right, to let it heal. But at the same time, the paradoxical thing is you're opening to more injury. So there's a risk of it. And that's why we'd like to keep our wounds. But I have decided that I took a conscious decision to be more open about my wounds, because I've realized actually my wounds help me to become the person I am today. Autism, being autistic, helped me as a child to deal with the childhood trauma and neglect, because I was always non-social. I didn't really notice the lack of social support around me so much. I was quite happy with the book by myself. As a health professional, it helped me to understand other people's experiences. As an occupational therapist, I could relate to them and develop a therapeutic relationship was more authentic and empathical. As a health researcher, it's also made me realize how we design services for being more inclusive and thinking about the people who think differently. And those people might also have health conditions, physical health conditions like rheumatological conditions, but also could have neurodiversity. So actually, getting that diagnosis even late in life was an opening for me. It helped me as a mother as well, because I was always more truthful with my kids, and I talked to them as adults, asking them to embrace failures, question their negative feelings, and not necessarily identify with them. So I would like to invite you today to think, what would you do differently when you meet someone new? How would you introduce yourself? And if they say something triggering, how would you behave? Would you say, thank you? Because there is light in there too. Both in the place of the wound and in the place of the trigger, there is light and an opportunity to heal. Thank you.